Today, I have to announce that schools will not be returning for in-class learning until the fall.
Schools will stay empty until September, the province saying it's looking out for the health and safety of everyone.
She knew right away what she had to do in order to survive. And when I say survive, that means survival in every sense of the word.
A survivor's son shares the history of a residential school in Sault Ste. Marie, where children taken from Caldwell and Walpole Island families were sent. He wants a search for unmarked graves. We take a live look at the Ambassador Bridge. The mayor pushing forward once again his plan for a vaccination effort at the Windsor-Detroit tunnel. A bit of rain there as well. Colette Kennedy will tell us how long it lasts in forecast. I'm Chris Hensing. Thanks for joining us. Ontario schools will now continue from home. A highly anticipated decision with just weeks left to the school year. But Premier Doug Ford saying he understands how difficult this is for parents and students, but the risk of a fourth wave of infections just too high.
What I'm choosing is avoiding 2 million kids going indoors for 8 hours a day for a 2-week or 3-week period. And, we want to get everyone vaccinated. Right now, we don't have enough kids vaccinated. We don't have enough teachers vaccinated.
The Premier says he hopes graduation ceremonies for all grades go ahead outdoors, but schools will remain quiet until the fall. Windsorites split on the newest decision.
Frankly, I think it makes sense because it's only 4 weeks, and I'd rather see it them stay out in one extra, safety factor.
I'm a university student, and there isn't much I wouldn't do to get back to school, to get back on campus. I understand the concerns, but based on what I've seen, there hasn't been any consistency, there hasn't been any pattern, there hasn't been any method to the way that these lockdowns have been structured and played out. And so I'm not so sure I trust the decisions that have been being made. Most Ontarians have been compliant to these stay-at-home orders, to the methods and, regulations being put in place, and no change has been seen.
Now, this might have a hard time for children already dealing with a lot during this pandemic. Kids Help Phone, they offer 24/7 counseling and referral services. The number is 1-800-668-6868. You can also text 686868. Caldwell First Nation is awaiting a federal court ruling tonight to determine if the band council fairly fired the former chief. The band alleged in court today that Mary Duckworth acted without authority on issues. It said she tried to increase the pay of a family member and that she missed meetings. But the former chief has refuted that. With more, we're joined live by CBC's Sanjay Maru. Sanjay, you watched today's virtual court proceedings. How did it go?
Well, Chris, the proceedings lasted almost 5 hours. The issue at hand is whether Caldwell First Nations Council was fair in its decision to remove Mary Duckworth as chief in September of 2020. At the time, Council said it removed Duckworth over allegations of violations and breaches of policy, for example, giving a family member more money and having a conflict of interest. These are allegations Duckworth has repeatedly denied. Through her lawyer, Duckworth called for her reinstatement and the recovery of $20,000 in legal fees. Here's how it happened. Last year, Council voted to fire Duckworth in a private meeting. Duckworth was not at that meeting, and she says she didn't find out until the public did. Duckworth's lawyer says this was done purposely to ensure Duckworth had no opportunity to defend herself. But the band's council's legal team argued today that Duckworth had multiple opportunities to be part of an ongoing investigation surrounding her own actions. Now, some of council's argument stems from precedent. Back in 2017, the chief at the time, Louise Hillier, was removed from her position. Council argues that Duckworth was part of that decision, so there's precedent to show that council does have the power to remove the chief. But Duckworth says precedent does not apply here because what happened to Hillier is completely different from what's happened to her.
It was the difference between night and day. First of all, it was done at a general membership meeting. The community is sitting around us watching this happen and unfold. That was not what happened to me. That was, that was driven by the people, for the people. If there's an issue with the chief, the membership should know. Not hear nothing, and then all of a sudden, boom, the email comes out that the chief is, been removed from office. That's bad governance.
I also asked Caldwell First Nations councillors to speak with me after court proceeded today, but they say they're going to reserve comment until the judge makes her ruling. The judge did say she would share her decision, quote, in due course, but it's not clear when that will be. We will continue to follow this story and we'll update you when that decision is made. Chris.
Thanks, Sanjay. CBC's Sanjay Maru live tonight. An update on COVID-19 here in Windsor, Essex. 18 new cases reported this morning. A little more than 71% of adults in the region, about 7,000 youth, have at least one vaccination. The health unit's pop-up in Lakeshore yesterday vaccinated 426 people. It will hold another pop-up at the Essex Centre Sports Complex tomorrow from noon until 7 that night. They'll have 500 vaccines available. Active cases, they're down to 197. 2 weeks ago, we were at 358. The area's medical officer of health says he's optimistic about the region's situation when Ontario starts phase 1 of its reopening.
I think this has been a success for our community, especially in the third wave. I think we dodged a bullet because of our high vaccination rate and our community sticking to the public health measures. So I think it is important that we are in a better position, and in this particular wave, we were able to even support some of the other communities that have been hard hit. So I think it's a kudos to the entire community.
The proposed plan by Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens to hold vaccination clinics in Detroit, the Windsor Tunnel, took a step closer to reality today. The board of directors of the Windsor side approving closing the border at certain times for the cross-border vaccinations to happen. Dale Molnar has more.
Vaccination clinics wouldn't take place during peak hours. The tunnel board asked that the city paint a line across the boundary line to clearly mark the border. The mayor says the logistics are still being worked out.
So we want to be working with all of the partners to help make this happen. CBSA, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, of course, we'll work with our Detroit partner who operates the tunnel. But we're prepared to do that. We're going to paint the line probably later this week in the middle between the United States and Canada, so everyone will know when they get there which side of the line they have to stay on. And your feet will be firmly planted in Canada, and the pharmacist will be firmly planted in the U.S., and they'll just reach across and give you a vaccine, and we'll bring you back up to the top.
Dilkens says he does not need permission from border officials in either country, and he says people getting the vaccination shouldn't have to quarantine upon arrival back in Windsor because they don't need to leave the country. He also says he doesn't need permission from Health Canada or the Public Health Agency of Canada. CBC News has a request into Health Minister Patty Haydu to comment on this plan, but last week said Dilkens need not go this route.
There are enough vaccines in Canada for Canadians. I will also point out that the United States has deemed that vaccination is not an essential reason to cross the border. We're working very closely with our American counterparts to manage travel at the border. And indeed, we encourage the mayor to refocus his efforts to the Premier of Ontario for the doses that he requires.
But the mayor says Windsorites aren't getting vaccinated quickly enough.
We're still in the middle of the pandemic, and what I'm trying to do is fully vaccinate the population in my community as quickly as possible so they can get reunited with their families, we can get the businesses open here, and we can get back to normal life.
So far, almost 6,000 people have signed up for the mayor's vaccination pre-registry online. Dilkens hopes to know in about a week when the tunnel vaccination program can get underway. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
There's a renewed call to search residential school sites in Canada after a recent search in Kamloops confirmed what Indigenous people have said before. There are more unmarked graves to be discovered. Tonight, we take a look at one school. Many in southwestern Ontario were sent to a warning. This story contains pictures and details that some might find distressing. As early as 1873, children from Caldwell and Walpole Island were taken to the Shingwak Indian Residential School in Sault Ste. Marie. Run by the Anglican Church, designed to take away the culture, language, and history of Indigenous students, the school didn't close until 1970. Susie Jones, 4.5 when she arrived at the school in 1941. Her son Jay shares how she was taken away from Walpole Island.
She's playing in the front yard along with her brother, and a car pulls up, and two men walk out of the car. One grabs my mom and one grabs her brother. They put them in the car and drive away.
Susie was separated from her brothers, Leonard and Leo, 3 of likely 150 students at the school each year, taught by people as young as 18 with few qualifications.
My mom always said she was truly assimilated. She knew right away what she had to do in order to survive. And when I say survive, that means survival in every sense of the word.
Susie left the school at 15 to become a social worker in Detroit, returning to Walpole Island and elected as a school trustee. She shared stories about Shingwak for those who can't. At least 72 children died at this school as young as 5 years old. Dozens of children who died were far from their family in southwestern Ontario, like Susie's brother, Leo. He went into the woods practicing cultural teachings, coming back with pains in his stomach. Sending him to hospital would require written permission from the federal government in Ottawa.
So by the time the letter got back, he ended up dying. But one of the more tragic parts of that story was my mom's other brother, Leonard. He was made to watch Leo die, and they threatened Leonard, saying, "If you try to run away, this is what's going to happen to you too." So a moment where you wanted to be with your family member who was dying and be comforting and stuff, it was held over them as a punishment, not as a loving type in a time of life.
Jay shares these deeply personal stories to educate, working with a group of survivors and elders who have shared stories of unmarked graves. He's heard about it at Shingwak. They want the same search done at Kamloops to happen in Sault Ste. Marie.
I mean, just today, I've heard that they've always suspected that this was done at Shingwak. So definitely, most definitely.
Algoma University announced this week they would take every measure to complete a search. The residential school still standing today. It's named after Garden River First Nation Chief Shingwankhaus, who died in 1854. Work has started to honor his vision.
And he had a vision of something called teaching wigwams, and this idea that Anishinaabe people could learn alongside white settlers and that settlers could learn from Anishinaabe people. Really this vision of cross-cultural education. His vision was really lost through the residential school era on the site.
Jay hopes reconciliation comes with a true understanding of the cost of the residential school era.
They went through things that no child should ever have to go through. And the biggest thing that was lacking in their lives was parental nurturing. So when you don't have parental nurturing, there's some skills that you don't get growing up. So this is passed on to the next generation, and my generation is passed on to my son's generation. So it's something that it's not just going to end when all the Indian residential school survivors pass. It's something that's going to go on for a while. And with that said, I think if everybody recognizes that and they find out the truth, they find some forgiveness, no matter how small it is or who it is with, they'll find some forgiveness, and then we can all reconcile.
More of what Jay has to share will be on Windsor Morning tomorrow. A National Indian Residential School Crisis Line has been set up to provide support for former students and those affected. People can access emotional and crisis referral services by calling the 24-hour National Crisis Line, 1-866-925-4419. The federal government plans to spend millions of dollars to help Indigenous communities across Canada deal with the fallout from the residential school discovery in Kamloops, British Columbia.
My present thoughts and actions with respect to what we've seen in the last week is to help the communities affected by the Kamloops Residential School, and I would note that there were dozens that had children taken to that particular school over the course of close to a century.
Some $27 million remains from funds allocated in the 2019 budget. The money was to be used to help Indigenous communities investigate and commemorate children lost to the residential school system. The Indigenous Service Department is also looking at ways to deploy healing and health services to help communities cope. The United Nations is calling on the Canadian government to conduct an exhaustive investigation to find Indigenous children who died at residential schools. The City of Windsor says it's tipping the scale toward ending chronic homelessness by 2028. There are signs that they're moving in the right direction, but there's still a lot of work to be done. CBC's Katerina Georgieva has more.
If it's not done by 2028, then we failed miserably. I think it's totally attainable.
Catherine Dunn has been homeless on and off for about 5 years. She's one of the 476 people homeless in Windsor. That's from the most recent numbers in March. The city of Windsor wants to end chronic homelessness altogether, part of a 10-year plan. So are they on track?
It is quite a few years out, so hard to say, but we are tipping the scale in terms of more people are being housed than are entering into homelessness. And so we're heading in the right direction.
We've had people that were homeless since the 90s and are now in housing and doing very well and thriving and being their best they can be.
A big challenge is lack of affordable housing.
We do have people on the ground every single day trying to figure out and find out whether they can secure private market rental units and support people in those units.
Even with some developments already on the go, it's not enough to meet demand. Donald Bennett was homeless for about 8 months before securing affordable housing about a year and a half ago, a heartbreaking time.
It hurts, like you're crushed inside, your heart, your feelings, and it's really hard on people, right? It was hard on me.
Others, like Dunn, are on a wait list. The Central Housing Registry currently has about 5,000 names waiting. Now, that includes individuals who are experiencing homelessness, as well as those already housed, but who are waiting for a home that's more affordable. In the meantime, the work continues, getting people into housing and keeping them there with regular check-ins.
We definitely are in the business of eviction prevention. I think it's important for us as agencies to stick with people and continue to support them as long as we can and as long as we have the capacity to, because it really is life-altering.
Meanwhile, folks like Dunn continue to hope for change.
I never thought I'd be here at 52. Trust me when I say it's an odd situation, but I'll rise to the challenge. It'll get better.
Katerina Georgieva, CBC News, Windsor.
A live look outside here as we see the rain hit in Windsor, a bit of a change from what we were experiencing earlier this week. What does the rest look like? Clark Kennedy tells us next. Colette Kennedy joins us now with a live look at the weather. A quick peek outside shows backyard gardeners and farmers might be a little happy with this stuff.
Yeah, we do need this rain. I mean, we've talked about how May was kind of dry, but really this whole year, Chris, since, January, we're talking about being kind of below where we should be for where we're at and what we need. So nice to have this. It's had an impact on our temperatures, and you can expect that. Look at Eastern Ontario, 27 degrees for Ottawa, and then, kept us down a little bit to have the cloud cover and the rainfall, drizzly at times. So now we're sitting at 16 degrees here along the shoreline. The winds aren't a huge factor, yes, coming in from the lake, but with this system, unless you get some downdrafts as we see some thunderstorms bubbling up, we're not talking about significant amounts or strength to the winds is what I really want to be saying. So closer look shows you some of the enhanced areas. When we get into the yellows and oranges, we're seeing a little bit better dousing there of the wet weather. It carries on tonight, but if you look at this is 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. Still some clouds in play, but much of the rain has moved on into the afternoon. Pretty isolated, but a few showers, thunderstorms possibly bubbling up. Clearing trend in between, then a little system into Friday could give a few isolated storms. I put a little extra cloud cover in, and really that's all that I've done for it because that system is even weaker than what we have going through right now. In terms of what's to come still, we have the potential still to look for another 15, 20 millimeters here through the Windsor area, a little less. Some areas are only going to see just over 10. Temperatures tonight, 14, 15 degrees for your lows, and here we go tomorrow. Just starting to warm up. 24 degrees. Friday, 29 degrees. This is where it really starts to get interesting. So we are likely going to see ourselves rolling into a heat wave here. Friday comes up, but the humidity really, you're going to be feeling it Saturday into next week. Chris, it looks like it's going to linger into probably next Wednesday or even Thursday.
Wow. It's good to know ahead of time that it's going to be cold or warm, and so people find ways to cool off during this pandemic will be top of mind, I think, next week.
Yes, and enjoy the rainfall right now. There's a reason to.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Cyclists can put their kilometers pedaled to a good cause. More when we return. Future plans to make better use of discarded food scraps and other organics in Windsor, Essex, undergoing an independent review. Yesterday, the Essex-Windsor Solid Waste Authority spent more than 3 hours debating a report which laid out several options for a future program.
Whatever plan that's there is to make sure that it's solid and it makes sense and is defensible to the public. That's the only thing we're asking. And right now, that part, I have a hard time. There's no way I can defend this.
Particularly given the framework that the province has created for us to work with. We're, as a region, we have different partner municipalities that have different obligations with respect to what's been brought forward by the province, and that's certainly created complications for us in terms of developing a regional program. And as a member of this community, because I think that the opportunities here that are in front of us are too great for us to allow for this to pass us by without moving forward collectively.
The City of Windsor and several county municipalities have been mandated by the province to implement a program by 2025. The city must divert at least 70% of its organics. Municipalities have to divert at least 50%. Windsor is the only community required to implement a curbside pickup program. Kingsville, Essex, and LaSalle are exempt from any requirement. Now, last night, the board saw a consultant's recommendations on a few different options, including composting and an expensive option, which would convert the waste into renewable natural gas. The review will look at the work already done by the consultants from a financial, technical, and scientific perspective, then report back within 90 days. Bike riders can be part of the first ever pedal poll. From now until the 6th, volunteers will be out collecting cycling data. The information will be used to make bike riding part of the solution to climate change and managing COVID-19.
The first ever cross-Canada poll for cycling, and that's pretty exciting because we need data. We need data to show where we are today and where our goals are to get to and how we're going to get there. Find a spot, check into that spot, and starts counting cyclists then. So it's using an app called Pedal Poll, and you click the buttons as a cyclist goes by. So we're not only tracking how many cyclists are going by, but there's also perceptions of gender and perceptions of ethnicity. So we're counting those things as well. And again, it's perceptions, it's what we're thinking. So yeah, we went for the first time down to the riverfront yesterday afternoon and counted cyclists. We saw approximately 220 cyclists, primarily men, 85% men, 25% women, very few children. And that is very similar to the data that we have found over the years in the surveys that we've done here. Having these numbers will be very important because then year over year you can say, what are we doing? Is it having an impact? Is that white stripe that we created down that road increasing the number of cyclists there? The more data we have, the more clear the picture is of who's riding, where they're riding, and why they're riding.
And that's it for us here at CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website at cbc.ca/Windsor. We're on social media too. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We live stream the show on Twitter and Facebook, as well as CBC Gem. Our YouTube page has the show up on it as well. The Rick Mercer Report is up next. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.